Hey everyone, Ben here from Stellar Work. In today's episode, I'm talking to Mark Poppenborg, founder of Intrinsify. Mark is working on nothing less than making the world of work less busy and more business. He has helped companies find their leverage and adapt better to external influences. So without further ado, let's jump into today's episode.
So here's to the journey, the lessons learned. In the world of work, the fire still burns. Benjamin and Mark, side by side on stellar work, with Intrinsify as our guide.
Hey Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hi, Benjamin.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've met, but we know each other since many years. How many? Since university, I guess.
It's been a long time. Well, were you still in university when we met?
Yeah, it was 2013.
Okay, yeah, that
2012.
was only just after we founded Intrinsify.
Yeah,
Long time ago.
I remember you used the Verband Deutscher Wirtschaftsingenieure
Yeah.
as a vehicle
There's
to
an
test
English term for that. German
is.
Association for Business Administration and Industrial Engineering.
Wow.
Couldn't be any longer.
Yeah. It's like, you know it's a German association by just looking at the name.
Yeah, exactly. We need to get it right.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've been, back then you've been using that association for trying out the Future Leadership Camp. And you went to my university and we did a course over there. And you got me hooked.
Yes. Oh man, I
In
completely forgot
Schweinfurt.
about that. That was the genesis of our relationship. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a very long time ago. We actually did that because we were due to conduct that seminar with a client, and we hadn't done it before. So it was a perfect. It was the
I was attending that and I was so stoked. Like the next years of my professional career and time at university just revolved around those contents that you deliver. So I'm really happy having you here. For everyone who's not aware of what Intrinsify Me does or what you, Mark, have been doing in the past years, can you give us a brief introduction to who you are and who Intrinsify is?
Yeah. You know what? I actually struggle explaining this in English because I never do. So all my work is in German. All my clients are in Germany. All my content is in German. And every now and then someone invites me onto their show. And I'm an English native. My mother's English. I live in England. So I don't struggle expressing myself in English. But when it comes to work, as you will see later on in the conversation, sometimes I actually get to my limits because I don't know the terms and the lingo that's being used around work. But I'm sure we'll be able to cope with that. So Intrinsify,
I think the listeners are pretty much used to it because that's like an English podcast made by a guy living in Germany who's not a native English speaker. So I guess everyone listening will be very, very pleased to hear your English instead of mine. So go ahead.
I don't know. So Intrinsify was born basically on the back of the idea that work can be better. Because I was very frustrated with my work. I found it pointless. I felt like, so just to give you some context, I was doing lean management. I was a lean manager. I was introducing lean management methods on the shop floor. A lot of industrial companies. I also had a interim management role in one company where I was trying to implement those methods, and there was partial success and there was progress and there was marginal gains, but there was no real breakthrough. And I often felt that we were doing all of our work just for its own sake because someone had sold a lean management transition, so we had to do it, right? But the actual problem that was meant to be solved got completely lost out of sight. So often it was more around how are we going to apply this method rather than how we're going to solve this problem. And that got me very frustrated. And I never understood why, even when a lot of people were on board and they'd, in individual conversations, bilateral conversations, they'd been appreciative and positive about what we were going to do. Once we were in a group setting, there was this weird resistance. And something was sticking, something was holding us back from actually making significant change, and we were always hitting the same kind of invisible barriers. And so eventually I quit, and then I founded Intrinsify, and Intrinsify very naively started off saying work can be better, work can be more purposeful in a way. And I guess that's often the case with founders. It was my own pain that I was trying to heal, and I turned
100%.
Right. So, it just became a therapy for myself. And maybe that was also the reason why we weren't very successful at the beginning, because I think we were trying to figure out what we were and what we were even trying to solve, which problem we were trying to solve. It's very vague. And we stumbled into being a network. So we hosted a lot of events. That's where the events that you then attended after we met at the seminar.
Those were called we events. Yeah. And I vividly remember, like, the way you did it is, if I remember correctly, you could pay what you want if you go there.
Yes.
And you just make everything transparent, like all the costs and everything that you had to do to set it up. And you said pay what you want. And what I did, being at university, I drove there in my friend's car. I didn't pay anything, I have to admit, at that point. And I slept in that car, or I found someone at the event and just crashed at their place.
That's commitment.
And I did that for like 3 or 4 of those events.
That's very cool. I didn't know that.
I was afraid of telling because it sounds poor, right?
Yeah, but that's how everything starts. I mean, the imposter that I used to be, I can't even... Sometimes I'm ashamed of that time, but then at the same time, I think that's how everything starts. Like, we were pitching to companies that were so big and so successful, and we didn't know what we were talking about. Anyway, so this network turned into like a breeding ground for a really valuable conversation about the future of work, I think. And a lot of ideas were being debated, and it was a little bit undirected, but maybe that was also a strength of that network at the beginning. It drew a lot of people in who were seeking an answer to like an emptiness in the world of work, like, meaningless work, bullshit work, fake work, whatever they call it these days. But over time, we gained a much deeper understanding of what the root problem or root cause of the problem was. So first, my stance on all of this was, we're just mistreating people. Like, the reason why people aren't enjoying their work is because they're being mistreated. We have to put the humans back on the center stage. We have to build companies around humans. We need to give them more flexibility. We need to satisfy their motives. We have to, etc. What I came to understand, and I'm only telling you this because I feel like this is the foundation of what Intrinsify is built on today. What I came to understand is that people don't dislike their work because no one's paying attention to their individual needs. People dislike their work because companies are built in a way, very often at least, where bureaucracy and internal systems are so prevalent that you can't actually do the work that you were hired to do. So you, as a software developer, you want to develop software. As a mechanical engineer, you want to work on innovative machines.
Yeah.
You want to fix cars. You want to do your job. You want to do what you are good at.
Yeah.
And
you want to create value.
Exactly. You want to create value and I think that's a very basic and universal human need. The reason why we feel like we're outsiders if we don't contribute to someone else's life is because we are. If we weren't able to contribute to a group in tribal ages, then we would have been an outcast. We would have been, useless to the group, and therefore we wouldn't have remained part of the group. So we have an intrinsic need to serve others, not in a submissive way, but in a value generative way. And I think we are constantly subconsciously drawing a balance, or drawing a balance between how much value am I adding and how much valuable time and resources am I wasting. And if that balance sheet is positive, if we feel like we're contributing more than we're wasting, then that feels great. That feels valuable. That feels like we're we're leaving a mark, that feels like we're actually contributing to society. But a lot of companies are built in a way where this is made increasingly difficult because you are consumed by bureaucracy. You are reporting, you are filling IT systems, you are tracking Excel sheets, you are pleasing your bosses, you are serving internal systems that aren't actually adding value to the customer. And the ironic thing is, and that's to me the most positive insight to all of this, is this isn't just harming individuals, it's also harming the companies. So as opposed to the idea that is often presented where the company's interests are in conflict with individual interests and they have to be balanced out, like where people say, oh, we can't be so profit driven, we have to look after the people as well. I think that's a fallacy. I think if you build a framework in which companies can thrive long-term, not short-term profit making, long-term entrepreneurial, sane management, then you will always benefit the company and you'll benefit the individuals as a collateral advantage, you could say.
Or I think that everyone would agree on that, but how do you do that? Like everyone is trying to do that, right? But what's the actual solution to this?
Do you really think everyone's trying to do that?
Everyone would agree that that's what you should try to do, right?
Okay, maybe, yeah. It sounds logical, right? But I think there's a lot of initiatives that are doing the opposite. They are making out that the companies have their own interest and they don't have the employees' interests, at their heart and at their very that they're not aligned, and that therefore there has to be like a balancing act of some sort, and that's why HR has to provide benefits or some sort of added value for the individual. So I don't think naturally companies act along the lines of what I was just trying to reason, but let's assume they do. Then it's hard because it's actually complicated building a system that serves value creation. There's a lot of noise and there's a lot of recipes for success out. Just in the conversation we had before we started recording, we were talking about all these frameworks and the blueprints that are dealt out by obviously industry leaders, consultancy companies, and they are very how should I say? They have a temptation about them because they seem so convincing, they seem so promising. Why go through the ordeal of trying to understand the root cause of your individual problem in your company if there's someone who says, well, this has worked for someone else, all you have to do is apply this technique and then your company will be successful. So it's very hard for leading managers in a company to take a step back and be open for useful organizational theory that would actually help them understand their own company. And this all sounds a bit abstract, so maybe we have to go into more detail, but I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
So what would you say is the difference between a theory and a framework? Isn't a framework consisting of many theories just balled together?
No, I would disagree with that. So I would say there's the actual practice, and then there's the way we think about the practice. So there's reality. Let's put it that way. There's reality, and there's a way we deal with reality. That's a better way of saying it, I think. And there's two different ways of dealing with reality. One way of dealing with reality is by using recipes which tell you what to do. And the other way of dealing with reality is by using theories that help you think better, that give you ideas on how you could act. So one of these ways tells you what to do. The other one helps you think about what to do. And that's a huge difference. So a recipe in a literal sense will tell you how to cook a nice Sunday roast dinner in the UK, right? And if you follow the recipe, it's going to be pretty good. It's not going to be amazing because there's always an added benefit if you've got a lot of skill and experience in making a good roast, but you're going to produce a reasonable roast dinner. If you have a problem that hasn't been solved before, and every company that has unique setup of clients and a unique setup of competitors and a unique setup of employees is dealing with problems on a daily basis that haven't been there before in that exact way. So
that's basically every company out there.
Exactly. There's repetitive problems, of course. Like, how do I repair this machine? Look at the manual, and then you've got a recipe that tells you what to do, and the result would be a functioning machine. So you can. I'm not saying recipes are bad. I'm saying they're only useful for certain types of problems, which are those where you have a preconceived knowledge that can be reapplied and there's going to be a reliable outcome because the problem can be fully understood. But as you say, there's a lot of problems these days on a daily basis that have uncertainty built within them. And if I want to deal with uncertainty, it's much better to work with theories that help me think of new ideas how to deal with that specific problem. And those theories are, again, we were talking about this in the previous conversation, a theory of constraints is a really valuable theory that gives you an understanding of what is a constraint, how does it affect a system, and how can I increase the throughput through a system if I think about a system in terms of its constraints. And then this framework will give me, this theory will give me an idea of what this could mean for my company in my specific problem. So when people say, oh, that's just theory, I think actually often they're not really criticizing theory. They're criticizing blueprints that don't work for their specific problem.
Yeah, bad recipes.
Exactly.
For things that nobody cooked before.
Yeah. A recipe is always bad if the problem isn't knowledge based.
Yeah,
it's the wrong solution. There will never be a right recipe. So looking for a framework or looking for a model that is going to give you the answers that's the problem in the first place. So you can't blame the provider of the framework or the blueprint. You can only blame yourself for not understanding that right now you don't need a framework, you don't need a model, you need a theory, and then you need to think of ideas that can help you in your specific situation.
Yeah. I find it quite interesting because right now we're in a situation within the whole agile industry where I am, where Scrum Masters or agile coaches are really having a hard time finding a job or keeping their job or like proving their value. And we see a bunch of Scrum Masters being laid off of tech companies at the moment because they were unable to really contribute to the goals of the company. And they are part of those frameworks designed to solve the problems nobody solved before. What are your thoughts about that? Or I'd much rather ask you, like, how would you react if you were in that situation as a Scrum Master? What would your answer to that situation be?
I'll get to that second question if you don't mind. I think what we're experiencing right now and what you've just explained was a predictable disappointment. And it's a predictable disappointment because a lot of agile evangelists or agile coaches or agile practitioners who teach the agile methods are focused on the methods. A bit like I was when I was a lean manager. I was focused on the method. So there's an inherent inbuilt problem that there's a misunderstanding of what agility actually is. My definition of agility is it's a system's capability of adapting to a changing environment. So, yeah, and we can translate that to other systems, like take an animal, or the human body is pretty impressive in its ability to change to changing environments. If it gets cold, then we've got self-regulatory processes that allow us to deal with the cold and the heat.
That actually reminds me of a funny story because do you know the Agile Manifesto where people would like define what agility is? So that was written in 2001 at the snowboard resort in Utah.
Yeah.
And they actually were thinking of a name like, how should we name this, what we're creating? And the first thing was like not calling it agility, but it was adaptability.
I didn't know that.
But adaptability was already taken by another person who put a bunch of content out there under that buzzword and had like a pretty good ranking on all the search engines and on the literature. So they went for agility, which I think doesn't quite fit the narrative they're putting out there. But yeah,
But we
that
would
was
probably agree.
just a side note.
Yeah, really interesting backstory. I didn't know that. But we would probably both agree that regardless of the name, it's very likely that we would have ended up in the similar pitfall. I would have thought. Like,
Yeah.
it's euphemism in the end, isn't it? And so a lot of the attempts to better companies are so focused on the methods that agility is not measured based on a company's ability to adapt to a changing environment. It's measured on the maturity of the methods implementation. So, we've got these maturity models that tell us if those boxes have been ticked, then we've applied the agile methods correctly. But that's ludicrous. The whole reason a company exists is to serve its environment. So if the environment is changing, we need to be able to have a more agile company that is able to adapt to that changing environment. If it changes less, we don't need agile practices. So and this leads to your main question, every organizational change, in my opinion, or in our opinion, I could say, should always be externally referenced. Everything starts from the outside, because there's two things that companies have to do on an ongoing basis. They have to deliver immediate customer value, and they have to innovate in order to secure future customer value. If they just focus on the now, then one day they're going to be gone. So that's the two things, and everything else is secondary or unnecessary. So everything else has to be measured by its contribution to those two core functions, and therefore every transition, any change, is always a concrete answer to the question: how is that going to improve our external performance? Are we too slow? Are our competitors faster? Yes, they are. Okay. Are we losing customers because of that? Yes, we are. Okay, we've got a problem. Is our quality lower than that of our competitors? Yes, it is. We've got a problem. Is our reputation worse than that of our customers, or our image? Are people not buying from us because we come across as, I don't know, old style, conservative, whatever? Yes, they do. Okay, therefore we have a problem. So based on those external observations, we can then see what internal structures are stopping us from becoming faster, achieving higher quality, achieving a better brand image. And more often than not, change initiatives aren't built around those external references. They're built around an idea that you have to implement a method or take purpose. Everyone's now trying to somehow benefit their company by exposing it to some kind of purpose program where everyone has to first understand what's the higher cause of the company, and then everyone has to subscribe to that. And so it's always the same ritual or same fallacy that companies go through. They seek answers in preconceived models. They implement them. They measure their success based on the implementation, not based on how external references are improved. So what we do is we try to first understand on a root cause level this specific company, and often it's more specific, this specific department or value stream in this company isn't fast enough to comply with the industry standard. So why is that the case? And maybe it's the case because there's a lack of decision making in a team that is serving the customer. Why is that lack of decision making there? Well, maybe because all the decision authority has been passed upstream to management, and therefore there's decisions being made far away from the actual problem with very little understanding of what the actual problem is. The team is just executing. They know that they should be acting differently, but they're bound within they're constrained by management's limitations, and therefore the speed or the quality of their decisions isn't as good as the competitors. So what do we have to do? We have to somehow, in this specific example, we have to find a structure that encourages individuals that are close to the problem to make problem-related decisions and come up with ideas that they can follow through. So every organizational change program or project that we conduct with our clients is always based on a very specific understanding of why is this company not leveraging its full potential at the moment, and why is it struggling compared to competitors, and how can it improve based on external references.
So how can I think of that on a practical level? Like, do you do some analysis, some research? Do you conduct interviews, or do you have like a tool tracking workflows within that company or decision making within that company? How does that look like?
So very often we would start our projects by conducting interviews. And the reason for that is that, and this is another thing that is, to me, that was a huge breakthrough when I understood this. A lot of companies have a front stage and a backstage. And you know this, I know that you know this, I'm just, talking to the audience. The front stage is what's written in the process handbooks. It's what you get told, what the company does. It's what the initial intuitive response would be if you asked a manager, how do you do this? How do you do that? How do you conduct that process? And then they will give you a textbook answer. But every now and then they're gonna insert the word it normally. Normally we do it this way. And that's the little hint that there's something else happening in the background that we don't see on the surface. And that's all the little adjustments, the working around the process, the use of informal structures in the company that are actually making sure that value creation happens. And everyone who's worked in a company long enough knows that if they just did what the process says, if they just worked by the book, then the company wouldn't be existing anymore. So there's a backstage that is the glue that's holding the company together. And it's an illusion to believe that without an understanding of that backstage and the cultural patterns within that backstage, you could successfully change a company, because that glue, that informal structure, that backstage is what orchestrates the current situation. So without an understanding of that backstage, you are going to be opening yourself up a change project that's going to become a show. Everyone's going to play a role in that show. Everyone's going to say, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to follow with this milestone and then pursue this part of the project and blah. But everyone knows in the background other things are happening. So I need to first gain a deeper understanding of the backstage. So we do that with qualitative interviews where we confront employees with our current understanding of what the backstage might look like. That signals to them, oh, right, we're talking about serious stuff here. I'm in a safe space and I can actually talk about the things that are really happening here. And if you're trained and experienced in asking those questions and leading those conversations, then you will lead people into talking about their companies in a completely different way, where they actually say stuff that they might say to their partner when they're home. And they will say stuff like, well, you know what, actually, if we didn't have Henry, there's absolutely no way we would even get 25% of our customers at the moment, because he's got this intuition that we need to. And if Henry didn't know Joe, and if this relationship didn't exist, and if we didn't walk on those trodden paths, no chance. But that's not you can't see that on the surface level, because they don't have any titles. There's no process that explains how this actually happens. So first you need to understand that backstage, and then you can connect to that backstage and ride that wave, as I say. Your change initiative is like riding a wave. If you try to fight the wave, it's not going to happen. You have to understand that system. You have to read the system. One analogy that I like to use is a swing. If you imagine a swing as the cultural pattern, and if you're blindfolded and you try to accelerate a swing with your child on it, you're gonna mess up. You're gonna hit it in the wrong moment, and everything's going to get out of balance. And it's a similar thing in change initiatives. You have to first understand the frequency, so to speak, the cultural patterns of the company. And if you are in tune with those, then you can accelerate in a beneficial way. So that's one thing we do at the beginning, get a really deep understanding of how the company works and what the root cause of the problem is, and then we can work on specific measures.
Yeah. Let's
Sometimes,
just
sorry, yeah.
Yeah, let's just pause there for a second because I find it quite interesting. I'm doing a very similar approach than what you just explained, and so I'm 100% on your side on this. And one thing that I discovered doing it is, and I really like this one, is that the solutions to those problems are almost always within that company. They're within the hearts and brains of the employees that I'm interviewing. And I think you experience similar things because you're nodding. And
100%.
so, as a consultant or as a coach, advisor, whatever you call yourself, you don't have to go into that system and just assume that you know everything and you have the best theory, you have the best framework, you have the knowledge needed to take them out of this mess. But you can just go in there and you can help people get heard and put their ideas on the front page, because you give them a voice, so to say, like a forum in which they can speak, like the backstage that you talked about.
100%. You remember COVID when it started, and we were all a bit unsure about how to engage with people.
I think everyone remembers that.
Yeah. So, do we shake hands? Do we fist bump?
Yeah.
Do we touch with our heels? No one quite knew what to do. And the interesting thing about that was that the social conventions were suspended, right? So there was no unwritten rule anymore of how we engage at the beginning of a conversation or at the beginning of an introduction to another person. And every company relies on unwritten rules that serve as a foundation on which the daily practices can be conducted. And I think this is something that's very often overlooked because it's so normal to people to base their daily behavior on certain unwritten rules. They wouldn't even bother talk about them. No one would say, by the way, when we meet this person tomorrow, first thing we do is do a handshake. There's absolutely no way you would even think about mentioning that because it's so normal to do that. And in a company, it's exactly the same. You've got all these unwritten rules that are being followed on a daily basis and that build the foundation of what's being done. Therefore, because they aren't spoken about, they can't be reflected and they can't be used as a stepping stone to make new structural decisions. And I think what we do, what you do, what we try to do is to make those unwritten rules visible and allow forum in which people can reflect on whether the structures that they've implemented, like the team structures, the managerial instruments that they apply, the methods they apply, payment systems, the goals, the performance measures, all those things, everything that management uses to control or to steer the company in a certain direction, to manage the company, I guess. All those structures can now be questioned on the basis of a common observation. Like we can reflect the daily normalities and ask ourselves whether they are still useful for the problems we're trying to solve. And only then can I say, okay, well, maybe it isn't so smart to have key performance indicators attached to individuals combined with a bonus that is being paid in case people reach those targets. Because then, with our specific setup and our customer base and the problems these people are trying to solve on a daily basis, we are actually breeding a behavior that is very individualistic and doesn't actually nurture cooperation between employees. So maybe let's rethink this.
Yeah. But most sales organizations would work like that, right? You would have like a big bonus at the end, depending on your sales performance, like the number of customers or customer order value that you bring into that company. And I think it's like a common practice. So it has to work to a certain extent, right? Wouldn't you agree that, like, at least for a salesperson, assuming that you have like 100% productization within your company, you can just like, when you click on a button and you open up an account for a software as a service product, let's say. And as a salesperson, that a bonus would really increase or drive performance in a good way for the company.
I would say, it's super dependent on the company. If I've got a standardized product and the act of selling is a very individual act and doesn't require sound, entrepreneurial, holistic decision making, or at least reflection on my behavior based on the overall company's interest. If that isn't relevant, if I'm just selling this glass that I'm just holding up, and I know that if I sell more, the company's going to be turning over more and therefore being more successful, then the damage that I do by paying people on a commission basis is probably very small. Maybe even beneficial, I would say. And it's proven in science that for repetitive tasks that don't really involve a creative process, and especially don't involve cooperation between employees across different departments, it's a fairly safe practice. But as soon as I am dependent on other departments, as soon as it might be a smart idea to hold back on a certain sales process because I might be able to, I don't know, develop the product a bit further or get more out of the existing client, maybe
customize the software.
Like there's so many more relevant factors that play into this specific sales decision than just one sales guy trying to get more revenue. And we know this from observing the exceptions to that rule. So whenever a sales guy is trying to sell a service or a product where the company knows this wouldn't be ideal right now because we're gonna overload the company. It's gonna be, and therefore there's gonna be too many distractions and people have to switch projects too often and all the waste that comes along with that. Then they will impose a central decision to override the individual sales guy's autonomy. And that's the opposite of what you want. You want a sales guy who thinks in the grander scheme of things and thinks holistically in terms of what having the company's interests at heart. So, and the reality proves that as soon as it gets more complex, these systems don't work. And there's so many companies that I've worked with and sometimes just studied, not even advised, where they got rid of those individual payment systems, even in sales, where it's so common, as you say, and they've improved because suddenly people talk to each other, they help each other out. They say, "Oh, I know someone at that company, and I can help you to get that project in. Let's work on that together, and then maybe you can help me out on that one." Or if you don't, it doesn't matter because it's all one big thing. What I find fascinating, I don't know whether you experienced something similar, these target or performance-based systems are so common and so unquestioned that often even the top management would never even consider their existence. I mean, consider the removal of these systems. They worked with a bank, and I was shocked because it was a fairly major bank in Germany. We were helping the management think about how they build a system that people use to make decisions, and we laid out these theories to them, like I just did in a very condensed form, and explained why the way that they pay their employees and the way they apply their KPIs is probably damaging to the company. It's probably worsening the situation. And they agreed, and they said, "Yes, you're right. That makes a lot of sense. We never thought about this way." But the worst thing was they said, "Yeah, but what now?" And then I said, "Well, I mean, you're the board of this company, right? If you think it's a bad practice, just get rid of it." Well, we can't do that. I mean, we've done this for decades. This is what everyone does. We're not going to get any salespeople if we do that, because every sales guy wants to be paid on a commissioned based contract. But it turns out, no, they don't, because they see the ridiculousness as well. They know that they postpone turnover to the next quarter knowing that they've already reached their target, just to get the bonus for the next quarter. They know that they're doing ridiculous things. Everyone's playing the game and no one's questioning the game. And that's the ridiculous reality. And what we try to do with Intrinsify, and what you try to do, I think, is create awareness around some of the aspects of the status quo and why it's worth challenging those elements of the status quo.
Yeah, 100%. I see it like, I wouldn't have even thought about that. Within a bank, you would have like a negative effect on a commission-based, like a commission-based salary within a sales department. Because I was thinking of a bank like you just sell indexes, or you just sell concepts on paper, and you could just print them as they are. You could put like funding here, funding there, and put them in different buckets, and then like charge a percentage of the assets under management. And for me, it would be just a click. Like, what would be the bad incentives in the commission on the bank? Can you give me an example on that?
Well, if I, as a customer, get the impression that my advisor is trying to sell me something because he's trying to sell it to me, and because I can sense that he's getting a commission for it, and maybe I don't even have to sense that he's getting a commission for it. I can just tell he's trying to sell me a product, because last year he was trying to sell me a different product. Then I don't feel advised as well as if someone from another bank is very interested in what my saving goals are, what my pension plans are, whether I'm going to move country, whether I'm going to have another kid, whether I'm going to build a house, whether I'm going to, whatever I'm going to, maybe go on a sabbatical and travel for 5 years, or whatever it is. So if the advisor has a true interest in understanding his customer, rather than selling a product because he's paid on a commission basis, only then will the customer feel like he's valued, and that's going to create a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
And a lot of businesses don't think in those terms because they are exposed to the capital market and they have to chase short-term profits. And I have to admit that in those environments, the customer's interests, as bizarre as it might sound, aren't always the most important interest to represent. So the external references that are equally or maybe even more important are the external references of the stock market and the shareholders. So I sometimes have to prioritize those, but it leads to those effects. But on a smaller scale, or sorry, not on a smaller scale, all those companies that aren't subject to the stock market or the shareholders' interests as these big corporates are, normally, their main focus has to be the customer. So therefore, we have a huge amount of companies that are running around paying their sales people based on a commission, and they would probably fare much better if they went to a standard salary and maybe a team bonus or like a company-wide bonus, because then they would actually nurture cooperation.
Got it. It's so my thinking was in terms of the product, right? Because like if you just sell cups, or you sell stock, it's basically the same thing. But if you have different time frames in terms of your goals, let's say if you have to sell cups this quarter, then that's your goal.
Right.
But the company lives longer than a quarter, right? They're aiming for a long-term customer relationship that goes on for years or generations even. But the sales guy just is looking for that next commission, which is the next quarter, which is I'm selling you this cup, whether you need one or not. I don't care at this point.
And in certain environments, that is the right way to go, because if I'm in a heavily invested environment, I need to survive the next financing round, then the customer isn't really that important. Then I just have to drive sales with any means I have at my disposal. But that's only true for like maybe, I don't know what the right figure is, 10% of the companies in the world. 90% are in a different environment. They're exposed to a real market, and therefore they have to serve real customers.
Yeah. So when one
more example, you probably know that example yourself, Handelsbanken, the most successful European bank. And they are so different to the other banks. They're such an anomaly that other banks have still not followed suit because they feel like this is ridiculous. although they're so successful and they have been so successful, it almost sounds scary to question all these practices. Like they don't have a central product department. They develop products on a subsidiary basis, because they understand that every subsidiary is serving a different customer base, and therefore they have to build services around the reality of those customers. That's why they're so successful, I believe.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you, like, when you work with a client and you're making use of those theories, what external reference do you use for your work with your clients? Like, can you give us like a case that you worked on and showcase the external references on your collaboration with those companies?
Yeah, sure. So let's take an engineering company that was not nearly as profitable as they could have been. So they were losing money because they weren't, well, the official and initial description of the problem was that the employees in the subsidiaries weren't charging the clients as much as they could charge them, and they were working for them on a two relationship based basis and doing stuff just to help them out rather than charging them for the services.
So they were friendly, so to say, like
they were friendly, right? Yeah, but there was a deeper truth behind this, but the initial observation was where we need to somehow increase the productivity. Our employees in those subsidiaries have to bill more hours because the calculated rate between billed hours and actual working time is too low. Therefore, there's a gap, there's a potential, and we have to leverage that. Another observation was especially the bigger projects. They had some projects that were cross subsidiary with big OEMs, and none of these were profitable. So there were big projects. They had a strategic significance. So it wasn't even that important to make a huge amount of money with them, but at least finish them in a profitable way, or at least a net zero way would have been good. And finally, the management was completely burnt out because they were micromanaging every single aspect of the company. And so the first question, or the first question I could say that we ask ourselves when we witness those kind of behaviors, especially micromanagement is a good example, is what problem is micromanagement solving? Not what's wrong with that person who's micromanaging. Why is he not why is he control freak? How can we teach him to let go? How can we send him to some retreat where he learns to value his employees more? But the question we ask is, what problem is micromanagement solving? And the problem that it was solving was that because they were with this unsatisfactory level of billed hours, they were trying to get involved in the daily grind and trying to steer employees into making better decisions, which consumed so much of their time that they didn't get to work on the strategic aspects of the company anymore. So what we did is we tried to first gain a common understanding of what the problem was. And one of the big problems was that there had been a divide in the company where the center of the company, you could say, was feeling responsible for profitability, and the periphery of the company, being the subsidiaries, was feeling responsible for adding customer value. But they didn't feel responsible for the company's overall economical situation because they had no understanding of the overall company's economical situation. So what we did is we turned these little subsidiaries not into profit centers as such, but we gave them an understanding of their in and outgoings, and we basically turned them into like little business centers that would understand the consequences of their actions on a financial level. And the reason why they were being so nice or friendly, as you said earlier, to their clients was because they were tracked on such a minute level, and they had to they had to track their hours on such a detailed level that every time that one of the colleagues would say, "Can you help me with this project?" the first question the other colleague would raise is, "Well, where can I bill my hours? Where can I track my time that I invest in this? I can't help you until you've given me a productive project that I can track my hours onto." So they weren't helping themselves on a natural level anymore. They were just trying to optimize their own productivity on the balance sheet, because they knew that management was tracking that in on a very detailed level. So instead of making this even more detailed and going into more extremes of tracking, we got rid of that system, established this overall business center idea, and gave the people in those subsidiaries the autonomy to make decisions based on a entrepreneurial level, and that completely changed the entire behavior, because they suddenly realized that every time they did anything, they were more aware of the fact that this was time invested, and they had to ask themselves, is this going to create long-term value for the customer or not? And they also started talking to the client and understanding their problems better so that they can sell them more services, which would then help the customer. Before that, they were just trying to maximize their billable hours because they knew that the management was tracking them. Now they were thinking, well, I don't have to bill maximal hours. I have to create a situation in which we make the most money and deliver the most value to the customer. So they would try to understand the customer better, which was an investment, which was not billable hour. And based on that understanding, they could deliver better services, sometimes in a lot less time. So they became innovative. They came up with new ideas, new strategies to serve the customers. They brought in new business. They grew massively as a result of that. So yeah, to answer your question, we basically worked on the structures and the context, and then the behavior of the employees followed. And also as a result of that, management was a lot more relaxed and able to actually address their attention elsewhere, which was strategic decisions that had to be taken.
Yeah. How do you go on the decision on where to set those things up? Because you said they were micromanaging on a very personal level. And then you said, okay, maybe instead of managing it on a personal level, maybe having like a common goal on the level of the subsidiary. Am I correct here?
Yep. Yeah.
You could as well have said, like, maybe give all the subsidiaries as like a common, like a mutual goal to have. Like you could hang this even higher. So how do you find like the right level to settle things?
You mean a equal goal for what, billable hours, or?
No,
No,
I mean
sorry.
that instead of like micromanaging one person, you look at the subsidiary as a business cell, if you want to call it that way. But instead, you could have said that instead of looking at each subsidiary as a business cell, you could take a different perspective and look at the systems of the business cells of the subsidiaries and try to optimize for their result. So I think that you could look at this from different flight levels too.
So rather than, I'm still not sure I'm getting you, and that's probably my problem, not yours. So instead of making them let's simplify it. Yeah. Rather than establishing like a profit and loss and treating them as a company within the company.
Yep.
We could also look at all the subsidiaries.
Yep. And find cluster of subsidiaries that you would treat as a company.
Right. And pool them. I think just in this specific case, it wouldn't have worked because all these subsidiaries emerged as a result of customer relationships. So they were attached to an OEM, and sometimes the OEMs often they had more than one location. And if there was projects that were across many locations, that's when they had these big projects that were unprofitable. And if it was just for one location, then the subsidiary could serve them. But there was no real benefit in this case, there wouldn't have been, to pool subsidiaries together. But I mean, that could be completely different in another case. So I guess your question or the answer to your question would be that we will experiment. We will try something in this case in one subsidiary, see if it works, and see if there's an interest in other subsidiaries to try the same thing, rather than apply a one-size-fits-all solution. There's another client we're working with at the moment that is struggling with decision making on a team level, and one of the reasons for that is that they got rid of, in a very radical transition, they got rid of all their hierarchies, formal hierarchies. So they only have managers left in the board, and the rest of the company is without any formal hierarchy. Now, that's definitely brought some advantages, but it's also brought a lot of disadvantages. And I think in general, this is really important to be humble enough to understand that there's always a cost to everything. Like, there's no right solution in any company. It's always a cost benefit analysis, and every option you choose will always have some disadvantages as well. Anyway, so in this specific case, the teams are often struggling with making decisions that are hard, that are tough, because there's no mandate to make those decisions, and no one will carry the burden of the repercussions if they make a wrong decision, because they have no authority to do so, and there's social repercussions if they try to take too much initiative. So they struggle with this, and the intuitive or the initial impulse that this company had was to establish team leaders in each team and kind of almost go back to where they came from. And instead of doing this, we said, let's play around with different solutions, and let's assume that every team has its own specific challenges. And the reason why team A is not able to make decisions is maybe not the same reason as team B. And team C actually isn't struggling. They're finding it quite easy to make decisions, at least on 90% of the cases. So let's approach this on a case-by-case basis. If we think it's a good solution, let's establish a formal team lead in this team, see how it goes for 6 months. And in this team, let's play around with some smarter decision-making processes that might help the team to come to decisions that they can't come to at the moment. So I think what I'm trying to say is, in a lot of cases, just being a little bit more specific with your solutions and not trying to hunt that one-size-fits-all approach, even on a company level, not trying to chase that perfect setup that will then work forever is quite a healthy mindset to have. Because only 2 years down the line, you're probably going to change it again anyway, and that's fair. That's okay, because companies change all the time.
Yeah, I don't know if you have heard of that Spotify case, because there's a Spotify model out there that McKinsey uses to transform banks, which is ridiculous, just saying it, using the model from a streaming company. But fun fact is that we know a couple of people working at Spotify, and that framework that has been created out of their way of working, it doesn't exist. It existed for like 2 months, and only in a very small part of Spotify. But now it's getting rolled out on major German banks, which is, funny to watch if you're not involved.
It's the irony, I think, of the whole. It's what we've been talking about throughout this conversation, and I wrote a piece about this because I also know a few people from Spotify, and they said the same thing. Like, they never had that model. I mean, they had it briefly, and everyone knows that at Spotify that in order to be successful, you are going to work around that model if it's sensible to do so. Yeah. And this is where this is closing the loop to what I said earlier. Any formal structure is only as good as the company's ability to work around that structure. If you follow the structure, you're dead. It's I compare to playing. I used to play handball a lot in Germany, and we would obviously train. How do you call this in English? When you train certain standard plays, runways that you would take, and
like you would playing patterns.
Yeah, playing patterns, maybe a bit like when a football team will take a corner and they will practice certain patterns and certain player setups, and because it's a standardized situation, you can you can reduce complexity, right? Like there's a little bit less complexity when a football player takes a corner than any given situation in a football match. So you're reducing complexity a little bit, and therefore it's sensible to apply certain patterns because you can try to achieve a result based on pre-trained running routes that players take. But everyone also knows that as soon as the situation plays out a little bit differently, we're going to deviate from that and do what seems sensible. Yep. And that's exactly what happens in companies too. There's a formal structure for a good reason. Every company needs a formal structure, but every company also needs an informal structure. And both are as right and as wrong as the other. And therefore it's essential to understand that there is no, this is where holacracy fails, I think. Holacracy is a super bureaucracy. And I've seen tragic cases of holacracy being implemented and the company going downhill big time afterwards.
Mark, I could go on like this forever. This just sounds super interesting. I really want to learn more, but we're running out of time. And if people want to learn more about your work or what Intrinsify Me does, or even just the content that we're discussing today,
it's funny that you still say Intrinsify Me, because you got to know us so early when it was still called that.
Ah, gosh, my bad.
It doesn't matter. It's just funny.
Yeah. So, if people want to learn more about that, where do people find you?
I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. It's got a little bit less in the last few weeks, but I think that's just a temporary phenomena. But they would have to use a translation function if they're not German speaking. Otherwise, there's we've got a pretty packed online magazine on intrinsify.de with lots of articles, some more abstract, some very concrete about everything we've spoken about and more. And I think that's often a good entry level to get to know all these ideas. And then we do what we call a deep dive every 2 or 3 months, which is like basically a webinar. But I would like to. We try not to call it that because I think it's a little
boring.
better. It sounds boring, and I think I truly believe that our webinars are better than what you normally find.
All right.
Online.
I will provide all the links and even the one to the deep dive in the show notes below. So make sure to check that out. And Mark, thank you so much for jumping on an episode with me. I really enjoyed it. It's like the second longest episode on this podcast. So thank you very, very much for your time and for being here.
My pleasure, Ben. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
We've come to the end of this week's episode. I hope you all had a great summer and enjoy autumn kicking in. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor and rate us on your podcast player. Write us a comment or review. If you have any questions or just like to connect with me and chat, reach out on LinkedIn or write me an email at info@stellarwork.com. It would be really cool to learn more about our listeners. And now to something completely different.
Hey Mark, welcome to the show. It's been years, don't you know? Back in university 2013, we started dreaming, chasing the unseen. Intrinsify, working it better, building companies that last forever on stellar work. We share our insight, together we'll find the light. The framework's like a recipe, step 1, step 2 tells you how to use it, what you should do. But a good theory gives you space to explore, adapting ideas, making sense even more. Intrinsify, working it better, building companies that last forever on stellar work. We share our insight, together we'll find the light. From not so much recipes, step 1, step 2 tells you how to use it, what you should do. But a good theory gives you space to explore, adapting ideas, making sense even more. A shared vision, making work right, balancing bureaucracy, shining so bright. For individual needs to company's goals, creating value, fulfilling souls. Mark's frustration, lean wasn't enough. Pointless meetings, the going was tough. Intrinsify was born with a naive start. Healing works pain straight from the heart. Intrinsify, working it better, building companies that last forever on stellar work. We share our insight, together we'll find the light. From the backstage truth to visible rules, Listen to employees, no longer fools. Breaking down bureaucracy, the internal game. With shared goals, everything's changed. Intrinsify, work can be better. Building companies that last forever on stellar work. We share our insight, together we'll find the light. So here's to the journey, the lessons learned. In the world of work, the fire still burns. Benjamin and Mark, side by side on stellar work, with Intrinsify as our guide.